Welcome back to Top 10 Tunes. Today we're going to be looking at the top 10 jazz albums that should be in everyone's collection. At number 10 is Getz Gilberto by Stan Getz and João Gilberto. This 1964 album bridged the gap between the flourishing cool jazz sound and bossa nova aesthetic and instrumentation. Since the record's release and standardization of this recording of The Girl from Ipanema, the familiarization and performance of samba jazz has become a prerequisite for any modern listener, or performer for that matter, of jazz. Listening to Getz Gilberto provides a gateway to another world of harmonic development, rhythmic accompaniment, and a synchronotic relationship between South American folk musics and North America's original art form. Coming in at number 9 is In the Wee Small Hours by Frank Sinatra. Sinatra was a well-established artist of renowned vocal pedigree well before the advent of the long-playing record. By the release of the album, fans could have expected another collection of standards, sometimes implying a loose theme, but this record was different. It was brooding, melancholic, and painted a picture of the larger thoughts and contemplations we have when the world is at its quietest. Looking back, this album is seen as one of the first concept albums and a highlight of Sinatra's career. While it omits some of his well-known hits, it accentuates what made his crooning special in the first place. At number 8 is Heavy Weather by Weather Report. Formed by Miles Davis alumni Joe Zawinul and Wayne Shorter, Weather Report helped to pioneer and solidify jazz fusion as the dominant jazz subgenre of the 1970s. The group's creative peak coincided with, or depending on who you ask, perpetuated by the inclusion of electric bass virtuoso Jaco Pastorius. Heavy Weather was in no way short of dense harmonic content or vast improvisation. However, it included singable melodies, lyrical phrasing on every instrument, and some jazz fusion compositions that have been canonicized as standards in their own right. In defiance of the traditionalist movement of modern jazz, Heavy Weather remains vital to all practitioners and listeners. At number 7 is the famous 1938 Carnegie Hall Jazz Concert by Benny Goodman. This retrospective 1950 release encapsulates the sound of Benny Goodman Orchestra at the height of their popularity and can be seen as the poster child for swing music. While contemporaries such as Count Basie and Duke Ellington elevated swing to the dominant jazz subgenre, Goodman's performance at Carnegie Hall brought the sound of swing to larger mainstream audiences. This performance also saw the emergence of the first superstar drummer in Gene Krupa. Look no further than this record's performance of Sing 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 with a swing to understand the swing phenomenon. At number 6 is Night Train by the Oscar Peterson Trio. A pianist with a long career as both a leader and a sideman, Oscar Peterson is a virtuosic performer in both bebop and classical music circles. This being said, Night Train is considered integral to jazz history and essential listening due to its simplicity. At a time when bebop had splintered and evolved, it was in hard bops, blues, and gospel influences that Oscar Peterson crafted piano trio performances that were hummable, groovy, and never short in creativity. Ultimately, the traditionalist mindset of Night Train could be seen as running opposite to the free jazz and jazz fusion explorations that would dominate the 60s and 70s evolution of the genre, but in no way was it a footnote. The stylistic choices of Night Train created a timeless classic. Rounding out our list at number 5 is Time Out by the Dave Brubeck Quartet. While this album could have been sidelined as another cool jazz release of the 50s, it cemented itself as a hallmark jazz album due to the success of the song Take 5 and Brubeck's incorporation of odd time signatures. By straying away from 4/4 common time, Brubeck encouraged a listening audience rather than a previously popular dancing audiences of swing, and helped guide jazz towards a recorded art form just as much as live performance. This leaning towards recording and composition also influenced the development of third stream music, a hybrid of jazz and classical music. Time Out is an essential anomaly that both encouraged an intellectual listening approach, but was also immensely popular. You can enjoy it on the surface, and you can dig as deep as you'd like. Number 4 is Giant Steps by John Coltrane. Often seen as the benchmark of ability for jazz musicians, Giant Steps was the last pure bebop record Coltrane would release before transitioning into a more free-form style. frequent harmonic changes, various tonal centers, and a blistering tempo, the title track is rightfully a stepping stone for any musician to test their prowess. Even seasoned pianist Tommy Flanagan has numerous false starts and resorts to just comping the chord progression. Beyond the virtuosity of the record, Giant Steps further developed Coltrane's burgeoning sheets of sound approach to playing, a style that would influence not only saxophonists but any lead instrument in a jazz setting. Giant Steps left large shoes to fill, but musicians have been trying ever since. Coming in at number 3 is The Shape of Jazz to Come by Ornette Coleman. Arguably the first free jazz album, while his contemporaries were bending the rules and constraints brought upon bebop's most fervent practitioners, Coleman broke these rules entirely. Melody is still present, often performed in unison with trumpet player Don Cherry. However, when improvisation enters the equation, only the drums and bass anchor the music without any consistency. Often mistaken for a lack of ability, Coleman's playing is unrestrained by a set harmonic progression and is merely pure artistic expression. Later musicians who had practiced free jazz would dispose with melody and consistent rhythms entirely, but Coleman's one foot in the past approach would make it accessible enough to earn its longevity. Jazz's most controversial movement was born here. At number 2 is Birth of the Cool by Miles Davis. Recorded between 1949 and 1950 and released in '57, this record was groundbreaking for multiple reasons. Performed by a nonet much larger than the typical bebop ensembles at the time, the group includes many brass instruments that were both atypically warm and even unusual to see in a jazz setting. These performances were also more composed rather than improvised, revealing a more reserved and contemplative sound than was previously heard at the time. Not only would Birth of the Cool influence Miles Davis's future recorded output and genre experimentation, but most members of the nonet went on to popularize the cool jazz movement of the 1950s. While controversial in removing jazz's improvisational heat, this album irrefutably invented the cool associated with modern jazz. And our number 1 pick is the enigmatic Jazz at the Massey Hall by the Quintet. This one-off performance highlighted the most outstanding performers of jazz's modern sound in the early 50s, bebop. Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, Bud Powell, Charles Mingus, and Max Roach improvised around some of the more harmonically daring compositions of the day, but more impressive is that neither of these 5 virtuosos, all band leaders and bebop visionaries in their own right, step on each other's toes. Instead, were treated to a masterclass of bebop improvisation. This appearance at Toronto's Massey Hall was so off the cuff that Charlie Parker couldn't bring his saxophone across the customs border and instead used a plastic Grafton saxophone. From the location to the participants, Jazz at Massey Hall captures lightning in a bottle. Thank you so much for watching Top 10 Tunes. Be sure to comment below with your favorite jazz album, and don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.